Welcome to EdUp Curriculum. I am your host, Nicole Poff, and today I am really excited. We have with us Dr. Marshawn Martin. She is a dear colleague of mine, and I'm going to let her introduce herself because we're going to have a fun conversation today. So without further ado, thank you so much for being here. What do you want our guests to know about you? And just, I feel like you do a million things. But all the work that you put into the world.
Thanks. No, and thank you for inviting me to join this. This is something that's a passion of mine as far as being in the classroom. And so, who I am, what I do, I have a very eclectic background in corporate America, national, international business. And then, now more recently in my career history has been in higher education for about 15 years now, both on the administration side and now as faculty. And I think, really I found my sweet spot when it comes to academia and higher ed. I love being in the classroom. It's really just as inspiring for me as I hopefully am for students. And so I do this hybrid of work where I am a public speaker. I talk on what my research has been on women's leadership. And then I also am adjunct faculty at the University of Hawaii Hilo campus for the College of Business and Economics. And that is just kind of my my grounding, if for lack of a better description. I just feel grounded. I feel connected with my community while I'm there. And again, I'm just inspired to be there.
That's awesome. There's something about being in a physical classroom that you just can't replicate. You really can't.
Agree. And I think what the university has done very well, especially in our community, is a hybrid course. And it fits well for so many reasons. Our island is very rural, so it gives opportunity to students that might not have had opportunity otherwise, or for, the non-traditional student, if they have jobs and have to fit a degree program with life, this works really well for them. So I really like that they're innovative and, for being a traditional university to really incorporate that as a degree program.
Yeah, that's great. I just learned that Hawaii has spiders the size of like someone's head.
Cane spider.
And yeah, cane spider, that's exactly what it is. I was on a meeting and he told me, and I was like, okay, well, I can never go to Hawaii now. So thank you for ruining
They're
that.
not as prevalent. They're in the wooded areas.
Okay.
So, where we live, I do live on agricultural land here, but I have yet to see one. So I'm thankful, but they're here. Definitely.
You're gonna come running back to,
Those are the fun ones.
oh no, yeah. You're like, okay, honey, it's time to move back. We're done with
First
Hawaii.
it was, and then we got used to it.
That's awesome.
And
Well, tell me a little bit okay, so you teach business courses,
mhm.
a hybrid model. So what exactly does the hybrid model entail? Because it's different for everyone. So kind of give us lay of the land of what hybrid means to your school.
I think it means something different to every instructor. We do get a lot of flexibility of how we want to design our course. And so, what works best for me and for my students after some feedback for a couple of semesters now, we meet one day a week in the classroom, and then we have online discussions throughout the week and assignments and things of that nature. So, it really is this balance of, and I do structure it like a business meeting. And that's what I tell the class. When you're in corporate America, or even if you're working for a nonprofit or whatever the case is, you do meet once a week with your team. That's what you do. And then you work autonomously, hopefully if you have great leadership for the rest of the time. And then you have the responsibility is on you to get your work done. And so that's what we do. We meet once a week in the classroom, and that's where I can kind of really dive into the content for the week, the chapter, connect with the students. Like you said, it's so important, I think, to have that in-person engagement. And then the rest of the week, we have fun online, through our learning portal and class discussions and things of that nature.
I love that. And what really piqued my curiosity, what made me want to chat about this was you left a comment one day and you said, I run my classes like a business meeting. And I loved that because I think it's so important that what we do in the classroom translates outside of the classroom. So,
Sure.
so talk more about that. What inspired you to do that? How do students receive that? What does it look like? I know I just asked you a lot of questions, but yeah,
Right.
chat about that.
I think as I was experiencing my education and, one of the many careers that I've had was being a realtor. And I remember thinking when I was going to school to get licensed, what I was learning in the prerequisites had nothing to do with a day in the life. And I was completely unprepared. Once I did get licensed and I was out there, I'm like, what do I do now? And I remember thinking, I wish there was some type of, yes, I need to learn the foundational learning, but here is practical application of what you're going to be doing day in and day out. So when I did start teaching, I wanted to prepare my students. I didn't want them to feel like, great, I have all this knowledge, this foundational learning, but what does it really look like to be out in the workforce? And I think it's especially important because I teach mainly freshmen the last couple of semesters. So we're talking about students that have little to no business experience out in the world. And, I want to set an expectation of this is what it might look like when you're employed. Of course, everything's ever changing. We're all evolving, but right now, this is similar to what you'll experience at work. And, and really it is, especially with a hybrid class, because I will let you know that I used to teach all online and student engagement was very difficult online, as you can imagine. And it was a constant reminder of please keep your camera on, please, engage, answer some questions, talk to your peers, that kind of a thing. And so when we're in the classroom, I always remind them when you're at work, you cannot just shut down and turn off. You have to be a part of your team. And, you don't have to be an extrovert, but you have to contribute. And so that's how we operate in person. And that really sets the tone for how we operate online too. So that way there is more engagement. It is not so uncomfortable for them to be sitting there with a camera on, things of that nature.
I think that's such a good way to frame it just from the participation lens in general, because I've seen classes where instructors are very rigid, right? They're like, you have to have your camera on. You cannot be eating. You cannot blur out your background, right? They set this long list. And from the student point of view, they're like, you're really inflexible. This is silly when all my other instructors allow me. But you're really kind of giving some context and some framing here of this isn't just me being an instructor who wants to control everything.
Right.
This is me preparing you for the real world.
Exactly. Yeah. And I do have some flexibility because let's be honest, especially post COVID, we all got used to working virtually. We all got used to having our meetings virtual. And so eating, drinking, that kind of a thing, that's pretty commonplace nowadays, as long as we are being professional.
Yep.
So I do have that flexibility with them. But in all honesty, it's similar to being in person with sunglasses on in a meeting. It's just rude to not have your camera on when you're in a professional environment, unless that has been expressed by whomever's running the meeting that that's acceptable. If it's simply watching a video or, then of course camera's off. But if we're in a meeting where there's supposed to be interaction and engagement, yeah, have your camera on.
Yeah. I think I really do love that because I think again it's hard for students to think about the rules we set within the classroom and how they they leave the classroom, and this is very clear to them. What do students say? Like what is kind of some of the feedback you've received about this approach, because it's probably pretty different than the rest of their classes.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar. I think most of the students that are in, especially a hybrid class, might have more online classes too, because that tends to be this generation's preference nowadays. And I don't blame them. The feedback has been great. I think, one thing that I give them a lot of autonomy, and I do that intentionally because this is their first year post high school. And in high school, there's a lot of hand holding. And in my very first class, when we meet in person, I set the expectation. You are now in college. I am preparing you for what to expect out there. Your teachers constantly reminded you when assignments were due in high school. And, there was a lot of hand holding. And in this class, that's not the case. We're all adults here now. I allow you to take ownership of your education. And, with that is the expectation that you're going to be completing your assignments on time and staying on top of these things. And so, when it comes to even the classroom experience, it's very similar. I give them that autonomy. So it's interesting too. I don't know if you've ever heard of gravity payments and Dan's philosophy about paying his employees so much higher than an average company. Wonderful case study. Anyway, he really set a new standard for, even his receptionist, his janitor, they all make $70,000 a year minimum.
Wow.
And everybody thought he was crazy, right? Like you're going to go out of business, you're going to bankrupt yourself. You're not going to get the work ethic if you're paying everybody like that. Completely untrue. Of course, his business is doing well. So I tend to take that philosophy of give them the freedom to really learn, number one, in their own style, but also to allow them to make mistakes if needed, provide the bumpers. So while I don't take daily attendance, I have never once had to. My class is packed every time we meet once a week because, I think it's their first taste of true adulthood, of really, and if, I think they yearn for that freedom at this point. They have been told what to do for so many years, as a child and now transitioning to a young adult, that I think that they appreciate that at this point. And so until that, potentially might backfire on me, I'm going to keep doing it that way. And really, because truly, once you're out in the real world and the business world, that is the expectation.
Well, and I think the fact that you have a full class is really interesting because we have a lot of people now saying, my classrooms are empty. They start out full, and this happened when I was a student. The classes start out full, and then over the semester, students start to disengage from the content.
Right.
It seems like it's busy work. They just know, oh, the instructor's going to be up in the front of the classroom giving a lecture, and so I'll just read the book and get the same amount of, the same material. So I think the fact that you have a packed classroom is really a testament to the engagement factor of this class. The fact that students still want to be there is amazing.
I try to make it fun. So I am a firm believer of lifelong learning. And in order to really develop that, it has to be fun. And so I really try to make and do not get me wrong, I tend to use a little bit of bribing tactics. About week 4, when everybody's kind of getting over the honeymoon phase of a new semester, I start bringing candy to class.
Cool.
And as they answer correctly, if they're open to receiving the candy, I give them candy. Or if they participate or give some insight for the class. And that's the other thing too. I always set the tone that I am there to learn just as much as they're there to learn from me. They all have their own unique perspectives, even though they might not have worked in business yet. They're all customers. They've all experienced a business. They bring in a perspective to share in class. And so, I hope that really sets a tone of we welcome what you have to say from your perspective. And so, but I do the little bit of candy here and there to kind of get it all going and make it fun and really try to give a positive feedback. There is no right or wrong answers. We all take it as a group. If it might be contrary to popular belief, we talk that out and see where that's coming from. And so yes, while I'm so appreciative that they're there every day and show up to class, I really take a responsibility that if they're going to be in that classroom, that it's worth their time. So I'm there for them. They're not there for me. And I look at it that way. And so, yeah, I just try to make learning fun.
I love that. And it kind of flips this model of I am the faculty. I know all the things that you need to know. And so therefore you must do what I want you to do, right? And I think that is kind of the main narrative as we build classes. The faculty to me will say, I'm the expert, you're down here, so, fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you have taken this from a completely different space of this is their class, this is their time. How do I honor that and make a space where they're learning how to be kind of good citizens of the world. They're learning how to be good business people. They're learning the things that they need to learn um, in a different approach. You're taking a very it seems very natural to you, I know, but you are taking a very different approach than a lot of faculty.
Yeah. I think the other thing too is I steer away from PowerPoints
Mm,
and the traditional lecture. Do I do a lot of talking in class? Absolutely. But I think if you were to go to a conference and go to a breakout session, that is my classroom style. So it's a lot different than maybe the traditional. And that's because that isn't business. It's
yeah.
very rare that you sit through an entire PowerPoint presentation in a team meeting. It is a lot of engagement. It is a lot of learning from each other, cross departmental input, things of that nature, collaboration. And that's what I'm trying to foster in the classroom. And I even tease, it's a theater style classroom, very large auditorium. And I said, if I had it my way, we'd be around a conference table. Like, I do not like this design style for a business class.
Yeah.
I know it's practical for a university, but, if we're really trying to teach them and prepare them, maybe in the future, a different design model would be great.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're like, hey, planning people, can I have a conference room instead of a lecture hall?
Although 50 plus students around a conference table isn't very practical either, but
Fair,
over
fair.
things.
Now, what are kind of some of the so we've talked kind of about the theory and how just how you approach the course. What are kind of some of the tactical assignments or skills that students will walk away from and how do those, how did let me phrase this. How did the skills that the students need or will take away from the class, how did that influence how you designed the classroom, the assignments, the discussions, all of those things?
Sure. So, number one, I was really focused on the textbook as far as how current it is. So I was fortunate enough to find a fantastic textbook that was written post COVID. So it really takes current business approaches post COVID. So it's that remote work, it's incorporating AI, it's wonderful. So it's applicable to what they're going to experience in the next year or two when they're out finding work and participating and contributing to society. However, again, we're talking about young people that do not have experience. So the textbook, there's a disconnect. That's not, it could be a novel for all they, there's no practicality in it for them. So how do you take that? It's essentially a history book to them
Yeah. Yeah.
and make it current. So the only way that I could find a trigger for them to connect that this is applicable to me in my life now, or it could be applicable in the future, is for them to do a case study. So what I assign each student to do is the Friday before the chapter we're about to read, they submit a current article case study about a topic from that chapter. So that way they can see that in real life, something's happening that the textbook is talking about. And it's these aha moments like, I had no idea, you know, everything. One of the topics in the book, for example, is mergers and acquisitions. And here in Hawaii, at least, we've had Alaska and Hawaiian Airlines merge and get acquired. And so for them to find that article, to talk about it, how it hits home, how it can impact them, it's little things like that that they're finding throughout the semester. And it really allows, too, the students to contribute to the class learning. It's their article that we're talking about in class, on the online class discussions. They're the ones that have given this summary about the case study. I ask them to provide me with questions, potential questions to ask in the class discussions. So they really take this ownership of, I am contributing to what we are learning this semester. It's a twofold approach. It's really, this is real life, even though it's in a textbook, this is real life, and you are part of something. I want to give them some value in the process.
I love that, especially from the lens of business in Hawaii. Like I think you gave a great example of business in Hawaii probably looks a lot different than business in New York. And so being able to pull out case studies from their backyard to just anchor them with some relevance
Sure.
is really insightful. I was talking with another school and they were standing up MBA programs in different cities. And they said it's one thing to kind of do an online MBA, but it's very different to ground it in Chicago and to bring in Chicago employers and really target the the future business needs of Chicago or the future business needs of Texas. And so it sounds like you're really kind of instilling future business Hawaiians. Is that what they're called?
Yes. So, I mean, we're definitely a melting pot here. Not everybody's Hawaiian. Even if you're born here, you're not Hawaiian. It's only if you have the bloodline. But what it there is here is that any resident, there's a sense of community, there's a sense of social responsibility, and there's a sense of pride. And so I think the majority of the case studies that we do get submitted are from local businesses because they do want to learn about it. And I do have even international students in my class, and they do something similar. So it, and to your point, and while we do that, we do expand because we have so many, like you said, the business model here is so different from New York or even abroad. And we need to recognize that, business is a global industry. And so it cannot be just localized in our perspectives. And so we talk about it. We talk about how we are so different and what others are doing. In Hawaii, everything's imported. And even the import routes are different. So when you're talking supply chain, it's very different for Hawaii than it is in the continent or abroad. We have a unique scenario. And so we explore that and we talk about that, or even human resources and leadership. There's a very different culture here. And how is that, these Eastern, Western views of leadership. And so we talk about that. And those are probably topics that aren't brought up in New York. So, it's recognizing who we are, where we are, and how we fit in the bigger picture.
Well, and I think from like a post college aspect too, these students are going to interview so well with local, whether it's a local position or a position, in New York or Chicago, to have understand the nuance difference and take it outside of just a textbook. Because if you just relied on the textbook, the conversation around even imported goods would probably look so stale. And then they try to regurgitate that in an interview
Sure.
and then what? And that's like you don't know what you're talking about.
Right. And there's no passion about it either, whereas if they learned about how their home state does it, then they can talk about it from a perspective of that pride or that interest and things of that nature. So I truly hope that I prepare them uh, for whatever future experience that they have. And um, yeah, and that they feel that they are valued, that, we talk about that too. I think as a young person, everybody is taught, be on your best for an interview, look your best, make contact, all how to be a good employee. And I often will bring up the topic in the classroom that when you are about to interview, remember that you have to interview too. You have to make sure that that organization is a good culture fit for you, that they have the same values, that the person that you're working for is someone that you can work with. And, because we need to change that perspective for these students. It's very different nowadays. And, we don't have that traditional business model of get in on the ground level, work your way up for 30 years, earn that pension. That is long gone. It is very rare nowadays. And so, we were even talking about the difference of an annual performance review and the percentage increase that you might get annually of that 2 to 4% versus what people are doing nowadays. And that is hopping to another career or hopping to another position, because with a new position comes that 10 to 20% pay increase. it used to be, at least in my generation early on, if you showed a lot of different
Yep.
jobs too close together, that was career suicide. Nowadays, it means that you're a go-getter. You're eager, you're hungry, you want that. And so we are in different times and we need to prepare them for that.
And I think that's an important conversation all by itself is if we have faculty members in the classroom who were in business 30, 40 years ago, and they're passing down the messaging of the way they learned it or
Right.
the way that they did it in business, we're missing an opportunity of today, which, like you said, looks so different than when you or I, because that was the exact same case for me. It was you can't move jobs too much. You'll look like you're a job hopper, and that's not good. And that
Right.
is what kids are doing now to see their salary grow is hopping jobs. So I'm glad you're talking about it and staying kind of current with today's world. How do you keep a pulse on that? As a faculty member, you have a unique perspective of training future business people essentially. So what are some ways in which you keep a pulse on the things that your students should be learning?
I am a avid reader. Research is my passion. I love research. And so I think just personally with my consulting business, focusing on leadership in general, it really transitions nicely to what I can bring in the classroom. Yep. I'm curious. I am a lifelong learner. I love to learn. And so I practice what I preach. I tell my students, I hope that you continue. I share often that the smartest day I'll ever be is the day I die, because I plan to keep learning throughout my lifetime. And yes, to best serve them, I have to make sure that what I am teaching in the classroom is relevant to what they're going to experience. And we are, especially now with technology the way it is, one day is so different from the next. And we have to stay on top of that. There are some great research organizations out there, McKinsey and Company, Center for Leadership, Harvard Business Review, that I'm constantly digging for information so that way I can bring it to the classroom and share. And it's really too so enlightening for me. I get my own aha moments when I find something new after a decade or so of researching, and there is something new that comes down. So I I like learning and I like sharing what I learned, and that's essentially what it comes down to.
Well, and I think you're probably teaching that skill exactly to your students too, right? That your class isn't the end all be all. It's a starting point,
Right.
but they have to really own their own career and their journey. And that's not something that you can do in one course for them, but you can
Right.
help them with that skill. You can help them gain that skill of lifelong learning or just being curious, especially as a business person. I would think that that skill is just invaluable.
If you want to make yourself marketable, have to. You have to stay current on trends or the latest of technology or customer service, KPIs. All of that is essential. And, we even talk about what makes a business successful. And of course, many of the students say the revenue that they bring in, absolutely, but it's also culture and it's also expenses. How do you save money? Learning those are so invaluable alongside with how to make the money. Uh, so, yep, we talk about it all. And I think another important factor, especially here in Hawaii, is trying to retain our talent. It's so important that these kids, get a quality education. Hopefully they choose to stay home or stay here in Hawaii, because it's very hard to have talent stay or to attract talent. But those that have been born and raised here, obviously have a love for home. And so really creating a space to want to stay, I think is invaluable too.
And I think that's really relevant even outside of Hawaii. I live in Kansas and kind of the same, right? There's a lot of indoctrination, I'll say, of, teaching our kids young to love Kansas State or KU in hopes that that's where they go. And then that's where they become kind of community members and raise their families.
Sure.
Because then otherwise, yeah, we lose them to other places and we lose that talent. So I think that that's a unique position, not just for Hawaii, but for a lot of other states. Maybe not the larger cities, but I
Sure.
think there's probably a lot of other states that resonate. Now, business programs, let's say just across the country, online as a whole. So we've talked a lot about Hawaii and the things you're doing, and they're great. But let's go broader, as you do in your class, right? Let's go broader and let's take it out of the context of your class in Hawaii. What do you think is the biggest challenge right now for faculty or instructional designers or deans or program directors as they revamp or redesign or even create new business courses and program designers? What is the biggest challenge they're facing?
Honestly, I work adjunct, so I am not in a day in the life of what they're doing. It would be really difficult for me to answer that without getting a broader perspective from those that are doing it. What I do see, even for myself, is, just like in corporate America, there's red tape with everything and we call them traditional universities for a reason. So being innovative is a challenge in itself sometimes, going contrary to what they have done for so many years, with the exception that that's exactly what we're trying to teach in the classrooms is about innovation. So it really is a matter of practicing what we're preaching and realizing, I think, just as an instructor, when I try to keep a pulse on what's going on in the business world, I think it's equally important for a university to keep a pulse on what's going on. For me in College of Business, in the business world, reach out to those companies, reach out to those corporations, learn about what it is that they're looking for, what it is that they're seeking in an employee or leader or whatever the case is, and then bring that into our curriculum. They're the voice. They're the ones that are hiring our students. So we need to know what it is, how to best prepare our students to do those things, along with the foundational learning. I get that. There's an importance of both, but we cannot ignore one over the other.
Absolutely. I think the employer voice is imperative. I mean, especially if we're going to start talking about gainful employment or continue talking about gainful employment, we have to bring in that employer perspective of the skills they're wanting. But I think it's also changing so fast. A lot of universities utilize like a universal design, right? Where it's one course is created and then that is taught amongst many adjunct faculty for maybe the next 3 to 4 years before that course goes back into revision.
Right.
In a business world, it feels like 3 to 4 years, everything changes,
Sure.
right? I mean,
Right.
how if and that's kind of the question that I'm getting to is how can we stay relevant with our curriculum when it feels like the business world is changing so fast.
Sure.
So how do we meet the needs of the employers and provide a quality education for our students while trying to build kind of this curriculum that will maybe last a little bit longer? It
Mhm.
seems it seems like it could be a really difficult time for business deans or leaders.
Absolutely. And I think a great way to figure out what might last a little bit longer is to create like a focus group of businesses that are in your community or that are in the industry that you want to primarily focus on and take a look at their 5 year plans because their 5 year plans, our 5 year plans should mirror similarly. Really, what are the things that they're focusing on and, incorporate those same things in instructional design and in curriculum.
That's a really cool idea. Because yeah, if you're looking at their 5 year and you're developing curriculum that needs to sustain at least three,
Right.
then then you're probably right on target for at least 3 years.
Sure. Sure.
Something I like to do too is, and I think you did this in your class, is just have students find information on their own, right? If you're teaching an accounting class, it feels like if you pointed to a specific software, that software could be obsolete
Right.
in a year. But if we said, you want this job, go look at job boards, what skills are they wanting, then you kind of leave that open for 3 years, right? Because the student is finding, here's a job that was posted today, and here's the skills that they need. How often do you revise your course?
Oh, well, let's see. In all fairness, I've only been teaching for 2 years, but I refresh it and revise it every year to try to make sure that it's relevant or what works best. Because I learn each semester what works best in the classroom, what works best online. And, while it's so easy to just transfer one semester into the next one, if it's not working, then I am not going to push that forward just because it's easier for me. So again, I really do take ownership of the responsibility I'm charged to do, and that's to prepare them. And so I'm doing them a disservice if I'm not trying to stay relevant or improve the process. That's essentially what business is, right? We're improving processes. And so I do my best to do that for them. And that one other thing too is that there's several of my students that are not business majors. So they're coming in from different schools at the university, and this is one of their prerequisites or whatever the case is for their degree program. And they really, I think the original mindset when they step in day one is, I'm just checking off a box. I'm in this classroom because I need to be in this classroom, but I'm going to be a marine biologist or I'm going to be a nurse. This is really not that applicable to me. And so day one, I show my students, I ask them across the board, what is your major? And I show them how business relates to that. It does not matter what industry you work in, there is a business component to it. And I even break down the business of a university. You are sitting in a business right now, whether you think so or not. And so we talk that through. And the true misconception about nonprofit, still a business, guys, you know,
Yeah.
and working through that because, the old acronym, the WIFM acronym, right? What's in it for me? Until they're bought into that, they won't absorb. And so day one, I show them what's in it for them. And while I appreciate that not everybody wants to be a leader, there are informal leaders in the world. So I talk to them. Do you have a younger sibling? Do you have a cousin? Are you going to have a spouse one day? You're going to have some form of leadership at some point in your life, whether it's professional or not. And so this course is applicable to you. And so we talked that through. I just really hope to prepare them, for personal and professional ambitions and goals and just make the best use of our time together.
And I mean, honestly, that's probably why you have a classroom full of people, right? Is they see the relevance to their life. I can't even tell you the amount of college courses I felt like I had to sit through in my undergrad because, like you
Sure.
said, I was checking off a box as part of the degree plan. There's 5 classes, pick one, and then get through it. So by establishing that with them right away, I would imagine moves it from this is just checking off the box to, hey, this is something that will actually be meaningful to me in my future life. I think that probably has a very large factor in why students make the choice, because let's face it, they do make a choice to come and sit in your class every single day. They can withdraw at any point. They can ghost the school and stop attending. They can withdraw after the first class. And so your students make the choice every single week. I'm going back. I'm going back. I'm going back. And I think that's a really big accomplishment. And the framework and the intentionality that you put behind designing your class, I think really speaks to the results that you get.
I just teach it the way I would want to learn. And I always open to feedback. I realize that not everybody wants to learn the way I do, but hopefully, there is some personal touches there. And, they can understand that it's not just a job for me. And I do take it seriously. And I really want them to be just as excited to be in that space as I am walking in every day.
I love it. I was talking with someone the other day about this podcast, and he's is not in the field of higher education, but he said, I love the conversations you have because when I was a student, I often thought, do they even care about me? What kind of conversation? Sometimes the things that they do, it doesn't even feel like I'm taken into consideration. And he said, your podcast really shows that you guys do care, that you do talk about us and think about us, and it's not just whatever you guys want to do. And I'm like, man, that was kind of a powerful statement of how do we know that our students know we care about them, right? How, as a university, as a faculty, as a dean, as a program director, how can we ensure that our students know we care? And I think this approach to your design answers that and shows students in a very genuine way, I do care.
Definitely care. Yeah.
Yeah, it comes through so much. And that's really why I wanted to get you on here is course design isn't easy, and it would be very easy, and it is very easy to design a course that's lacking, right? That's here's the textbook, copy and paste, do a case study, 2.1 in chapter 2, and then in week 3 you're going to read chapter 3, right? It would be really easy to design a course that way. Or to use ChatGPT to write a course for you. But you're a really good model of what it looks like when students are at the absolute core of the course design.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I am not an expert. I just go with what I feel is best for them. And and really preparing them for that, like I said, because they have little to no experience so far. So, at least laying a pretty solid foundation, just setting the expectation. Not that they're going to be completely prepared when they leave my class, but there's an expectation set and that they have to continue to learn to get to
Yeah.
where they be.
And I think that's a really important piece too. I felt like I was going to wrap us up, but I wanted to say this too. I think a lot of times we assume that the parents prepared students in this way, but we have to remember that not all of our students have the social capital that we might have had, right?
Sure.
Not all of the kids in our classroom have parents who worked an 8 to 5 job that modeled professional behavior or professional communication. Their parents may not have worked. Their parents may have been farmers.
Sure.
And what they wore to work was overalls and, boots, right?
Yeah.
And I think there is a kind of a default assumption that our students know what business is and what it looks like, even the simplest things of what to wear to an interview.
Sure.
And it sounds like you've taken a step back and said, I'm going to not assume that students
Without a doubt.
know any of this.
Right. Absolutely. And maybe that's the mom in me, right? I've got kids and I see it firsthand. Don't assume. They're
Yeah.
they're brilliant minds, definitely, but without exposure to the information, how would they ever know? So yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I think we skip that, and I'm glad to hear a model of just kind of setting the stage, because we can't assume that all of our students have have ever seen professional behavior in action, right? They could have never they some of our students may have never even stepped inside of a boardroom before or seen an office that has cubicles, right? They may literally have zero knowledge of what that actually looks like,
Right.
and we're skipping past and just making the assumption that they do.
Agreed.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. This conversations like this just like give me so much energy because I love to hear thoughtful faculty designing curriculum with the students' best interest in mind. And I hope that people who are listening have taken away just some little nuggets of what it could look like for their classroom to approach this from a lens of student first and then kind of everything else second.
Thank you. And I look forward to continuing on with the podcast because I want to grab those nuggets too and learn from what other people are doing. So I appreciate you doing this and the opportunity to share a little bit. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.